I knew about narcissistic abuse, but it never occurred to me that the emotional abuse would just wear away at my body. So it's been the healing journey of going through all of that I've been dedicated to in my own life, and then also in the lives of my clients that I've been working with for the last 25 years, helping them heal the impact. It's because it can be enormous. I mean, just autoimmunity. I mean, that's cancer. I see so many people with those two things, and there's so many reasons why. There's all the chemicals in the environment, the chemicals in the food, and that's a big part of why I address the entire system.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another beautiful episode of Witchy Wellness Radio, the show you learn how your body is not in the way, but actually leading the way. And we have a beautiful guest here to talk about the emotional impact of narcissistic abuse on our body and how to actually release and heal that energy. Today, we are talking with Dr. Meg Haworth, and she is a doctor of transpersonal psychology and holistic chef. Dr. Meg Haworth helps women survivors of parental narcissistic abuse heal holistically. Her somatic emotional release process, whole person integration technique, helps clients let go of stored trauma in their bodies. She also helps them heal using anti-inflammatory foods for specific health concerns. She works individually with clients worldwide, has online classes for narcissistic abuse recovery, certifies coaches and therapists with her technique and her evolving intuition course. Dr. Meg has an active YouTube channel, is an international speaker, a best-selling author of 6 books, and has been featured on Fox 11 LA, NBC Nightly News, the LA Times, and countless other publications. And we are so excited to have Dr. Meg on the show today. Welcome.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to have this conversation.
I am too. I was just saying this was the part kind of my own healing journey. I've never actually had anybody on to talk about the specific topic because it's so, I think, mainstream now, and people like to point the finger and be victims to things and not really understand what's going on in the situation and the other person, but more so themselves. So I love your approach and technique and philosophy with all of this. And I would love to hear, how did you get into actually helping women heal that emotional impact and work with their own energy to release this and heal?
Yeah, well, my own personal story, because I've been through it myself. Multiple men in my life were narcissists. I've had women friends who were narcissists as well. And it was just, such a journey. In my 20s, I got very, very sick. And, I'm now in my, mid 50s. So I've been doing this for a very long time, but I did it the very long and difficult way. So I love to condense that for people to really help them through the impact that abuse has on the body. Because being in and out of doctor's offices for 10 years and getting diagnosis after diagnosis, and finally stepping outside of Western medicine and finding a chiropractor to help with the muscle spasms in my neck from scoliosis, or so I thought. It ended up being dairy products. Plus it's just like our bodies are just so complex and they react to so many things. And at the time, I didn't understand I was an empath and a sensitive. We didn't know what that was 25 years ago. Like, it just wasn't talked about. I knew about narcissistic abuse, but it never occurred to me that the emotional abuse would just wear away at my body. So it's been the healing journey of going through all of that I've been dedicated to in my own life, and then also in the lives of my clients that I've been working with for the last 25 years, helping them heal the impact. It's because it can be enormous. I mean, just autoimmunity. I mean, that's cancer. I see so many people with those two things, and there's so many reasons why. There's all the chemicals in the environment, the chemicals in the food, and that's a big part of why I address the entire system: mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual, energetic. because we're a holistic system. We're not just, it's not just mental health we're dealing with. It's all of it wrapped up into one.
Amen. I agree. And I think so many of us, I mean, obviously listening to Witchy Wellness, identify as empaths and we realize how sensitive our systems are. And sometimes we can feel like a victim to that, right? Like you said, going to doctor's office to doctor's office, trying to find out what was wrong. And you might get
Yeah.
an answer, you might not. It's just like it's enough to feel like you're going crazy to begin with. But add in a relationship of any kind to this caliber of abuse, it's
Yeah.
it's a wake-up call for sure for people
Yeah.
to, really take a look inside of, the kind of people, what do you feed your body with, right?
Yeah.
And the connection between people in your life, your own thoughts, who you're being, and your body's health. I think that holistic approach is just so instilled in me, but as an empath, I think that's pretty much a natural part of everybody's journey in their own way of healing.
Yeah. Absolutely. Because empaths, we're sensitive. We're also highly intuitive. And if you've been in a narcissistically abusive relationship, your intuition gets diminished greatly because you're constantly questioning, wait, was that me? Am I the problem? And because you're being told you're the problem, you're being blamed for everything. You get worn down so much. So just what it does to the entire system it just impacts everything.
So I
Yeah.
think a lot of people know about narcissistic abuse, but just very briefly, could you give us kind of a synopsis of what that looks like? I guess from a clinical point of view, but also that spiritual, emotional point of view too.
I kind of want to go to the spiritual emotional first because the impact that emotions have on our bodies is enormous. And when you're in a negative emotional situation with somebody who's narcissistically abusive, someone who has no empathy, which is one of the hallmarks of the disorder, someone who has no real regard for you, who doesn't really care about you. And I know everyone says, oh, a narcissist only loves themselves, but they don't even do that. They're really miserable. They're the most miserable people on earth, and they cannot own responsibility for anything. Therefore, you become the victim of everything that they're pushing down inside of themselves. So they're just projecting onto you all the time. I think that ultimately, like it's at some point or another, they make the decision that it's too painful, and then they just put a wall around themselves. They don't let love in, and they don't let love out. And so if you think about that dynamic and what that does, or what it can do, I mean, that's a narcissistically abusive relationship. But ultimately, I think it's an energy dynamic because it's all about power, abuse, bullying, shaming, blaming, guilting. So these major emotions that have the most impact on the body, for instance, shame. It's a shame-driven disorder. They're trying to not deal with their shame at all. So they're pushing it out on everyone around them. They're not going to own it. So you get to carry not only your own shame, because you're ashamed because you're in this relationship and allowing this person to do this, but you're also carrying their shame. And when you're an empath, you're a sponge for it. That's a big part of being an empath, is we're just emotional sponges. So it's helping to release the emotional energy from the energy field and thus the body, because those things are one thing.
Yeah, feel that shame. Like when you said that, I could feel the chills through my body and my own experience. I'm like, oh, yeah, it's exactly how it felt. And like that was a manifestation of the physical illness and symptoms and diagnoses, like that, doing a lot of the metaphysical work of it, like Louise Hay, you can heal
Mhm.
your body. Looking up, like it's like my spiritual version of Weapon D back in the day was like,
Yes,
okay, what
mine
emotions
too.
are causing this? And
Yeah.
so much of it was shame. It was the lower root chakra, sacral chakra, a lot of reproductive issues for me that were popping up out of nowhere, and really had to, with me healing, releasing my own shame. And now that you said that, like it makes so much more sense of releasing theirs as well. Because it's
Yeah,
like, that's why that attraction, between the empath or the codependent, is like a lot of mainstream people would say as well, and narcissistic relationship, is because it's like the narcissist sees this beautiful, shiny, I don't want to say shiny object, but somebody maybe who could
absolutely.
heal them in a way. Is that where the attraction comes from? Or like
Kind of.
what's your view?
mm, they're not looking for healing. That's
Okay.
just not an option for them. But they are looking for somebody who is good-natured, kind, loving, caring, and empathetic, all of the things that they aren't. One is, and I hate to say this, but it's just the truth, is that those of us that are in that, especially those of us who haven't done our work yet, are easy to control, unfortunately, because we're so good-hearted, we're so kind, we're the ultimate people pleaser, and if you had a narcissistically abusive parent, which is one of the things I focus on mainly, is parental narcissistic abuse, because that informs your relationships later in your life. That was part of my story, is having that, and then attracting relationships because they felt familiar. But I also think that we attract those relationships so we can heal them, because it's giving us the opportunity, a really like beautiful opportunity, honestly. The people that are hardest on us, I think, are our biggest teachers. As painful as that is to really come to grips with. And I know the first time I heard somebody say that, I was like, what? I wouldn't choose this, I'm like, well, if it's getting me that mad, I think I need to explore it, And I did. And that's really where it lies, is that energy that I was holding on to in relationship to them and their treatment of me. And as long as I stayed in that place of feeling like a victim of their treatment, as long as I saw they were doing something to me, instead of me realizing like, this is for me and I can use this for my own growth, my own development, and I don't have to be with these people anymore. Now I can set those boundaries and stop those relationships and start relationships with people that are much healthier. Because, as you release, you're just vibrating at a higher and higher level. And the higher frequency you go, the more higher frequency people you attract, like you,
Yeah.
like you pop up on LinkedIn and we start talking and it's like, oh, wow, you do that. Let's talk.
Yeah. Yeah. Everything just kind of comes right to you. Like you said, it's like the more you do the work. And that's what I teach my clients too, is like, if you're feeling like everything's hitting the fan and you're doing a lot of this inner work, the shadow work, don't be surprised if manifestations start to appear in your life that you've been either forgot about or working on, because you're letting go and you're releasing all of that stuff. And naturally, your energy, you're going to vibrate higher, and these things are going to just come right to you. You're going to be like, well, I just had a meltdown. How am I manifesting, all of this? But it's like, when you allow yourself to really feel, and I want to dive into your approach to the somatics of it and releasing that from the energy, your body is going to naturally just vibrate higher. Once it knows what to do, it knows how to move the energy. So I would love to hear, I know you approach this in a different way, which I'm so aligned with too in my life and my body. The somatic practice of actually moving this energy out of your body and releasing it, and how that looks.
Absolutely. So the technique I created is called whole person integration technique. And it's really about integrating those parts of the self. It's the emotions that I was talking about earlier, the shame, the guilt, all what everyone calls negative emotions that most of us are running away from. We're numbing them. Like, it's too painful, because it certainly is painful. However, I think of them, instead of negative emotions, I think of them as teaching emotions. And they're here to teach us something about who we really are, if we would only listen to them. Because in most cases, those emotions, the shame, the guilt, the sorrow, the pain, all of that, they're trying to protect us from further harm. But, on planet Earth, you can't do that. I mean, there people will break your heart. The things that happen around you hurt. I mean, there's so many things that we go through as humans. And the more we release these emotions that become toxic to the body over time. So, for instance, let's look at, sexual abuse is something I've worked with a lot and something I went through as a child as well, which a lot of empaths, we had a lot of trauma as well, as the narcissist often does. And so say you're carrying a lot of shame and you're carrying it, you've got all these stomach problems. So your illness will tell me right away, what center's being drained and what attributes of that center, are happening for you. And so your confidence, your personal power, your relationship to yourself, all of that are being drained. So then I'll look at so what's going on in your life? What was your upbringing like and all of that? But we don't focus as much on the story of what happened to you, because traditional psychology keeps you spinning in the story. I want to get you to what the emotions experience is, what it thinks, what it feels, what it believes, because there's negative core beliefs that get held in the body from that emotional experience, from the shame, for instance, in the stomach. It just drains you and drains you and drains you over time, making you so much more susceptible to illness, to colds, to anything, to chemicals, things that you put on your body, things that you just scented candles, like anything can really wear your system down even further, because your system's already weakened from the emotional state. And everything starts with a thought, everything. And that happens in your physical body as well. So getting to those thoughts, feelings, and beliefs that are hurting you and helping you let them go, I have found it's been the most powerful modality, or types of modalities, those somatic emotional release modalities that have helped me heal, and certainly that I watch my clients heal.
Yes, yes, yes. I totally agree. And I think there's, that has to be, for me at least, the foundation. And I know you agree in the sense of like feeding yourself well, right? The anti-inflammatory foods, the thoughts, the emotions, it's a holistic approach. Actually, I started off my entrepreneurial journey as a health coach. And so it was
Great.
kind of come full circle in the sense I used to always tell my clients, you can eat your body's weight in kale or whatever superfood you want, but if you're feeling all the shame and the stress and all these emotions that you're not dealing with, it doesn't matter. It does
Yeah.
not matter. It's still gonna chronically deteriorate your body. But I know that there's a balance too. It's like I don't want people to just eat processed McDonald's all day either. No, no, no. We want to
No.
support our body with these beautiful foundation, these building blocks, food's energy.
Yeah.
And what vibration in which do you want to fuel your body with? And that includes your thoughts and your emotions, but also physically what we consume as well, which is a huge impact. But I think you need all of them. I don't know if you just can do one or the other. I don't really know if that'll make lasting change or not.
It really doesn't. And I think ultimately, if you're not working on the energy piece, like you said, the emotional energy piece and the way you've been storing those emotions in your system, you'll get well to a point, but then you'll hit a wall, and then you'll need more help. You'll need a different kind of help than what you've been working with. One of the things I say often, and you kind of touched on it a little bit ago, is that as long as you're in a body, the fun never stops. There's always another layer to go to. It's just that as you become adept at healing, self-healing, and finding healers that will help you with the next level, you will release so much more quickly and get to the other side of the thing so much faster than you used to. You just get better and better and better at it, because you're practicing your release work. You're practicing your healing every day.
And
I still do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
me too. Me too.
It's like I didn't just stop there, but I love my healing journey. I love my healing practice and the things I do on a daily basis to continue raising frequency and continued health. I think I'm healthier now at 56 than I was at 25. which is like, wow, I never would have guessed that. At the time, I just thought I was like doomed to chronic illness, which a lot of people think they're doomed to. The word chronic is a heavy duty word,
Yeah.
But
And I think like just thinking about the chronic, but also hereditary. People think
yes,
because my mom and my grandpa, like, therefore I will have it. Well, yeah, if you will continue the same emotional patterns and belief systems and energy, yeah, of course.
generational trauma.
Generational trauma.
Yes,
And I think, I mean,
yes.
whether it's generational or multiple lifetime, wherever you think or believe it comes from, for me, I got so down the rabbit hole of like, well, where did this come from?
Yeah,
It's really like you said, and I think it was so beautiful how you said it. It's not focusing on the story, getting lost in the story, whether that's this lifetime or the spiritual. What alternate lifetime did this come from? But the feeling. What is the feelings, beliefs, the thoughts underneath it, and be able to really get to the root and the core of why that's still there and still stored in your body, instead of getting wrapped in the story, or making excuses why things can't change. And that, that's really the victim perspective. And you said this earlier, and before I even can respond, because I was like, oh, yes, I so agree. And it was like, life isn't happening to you, it's happening for you. And sometimes things like narcissistic abuse or chronic illness as an empath, that's happening for you because it's a wake-up call. It's an awakening, I think, of sorts for people. And it's not because your higher self or God or the universe hates you or is doing this it's really because your higher self is like, wants you to grow, wants you to remember who you really, really are. It's from this place of love. So if you're at a place, whatever it is, physically, emotionally, abundance wise, that you're not in love with right now, know that this is an opportunity for you to take that inner look, to really feel and to change and to transform. It's happening for you and for your growth, to remember really, really who you are. And that's why I started this show, was my own journey because of my own situation with narcissistic abuse. And I even hesitate saying abuse because I know that's what it is, but because it's
yeah,
been such a beautiful gift for me in my own journey. It's like I don't even want to associate it with abuse sometimes, because it was hard,
yeah,
but it really catapulted me into looking at myself in a way that I never had before.
yeah, yeah. And
Yeah.
what you're talking about right now too is wake-up calls.
Yes.
And we all get them. And whether or not you take the call is really up to you. But you took the call and you said, you know what, I'm going to transcend this. I'm not going to continue allowing this to beat me down and keep me sick. And you also thought outside the cultural box of chronic, of hereditary, which, oh, I'm so glad you brought that up, because that's a huge piece. Narcissism will come down through the family system. It's, if you look back, and this is what I think a lot of people are missing, is they're like, oh my gosh, I ended up in this narcissistically abusive relationship and I don't know how it happened. But a lot of times you're not really looking at your parent, or you're afraid to look at your parent. A lot of people, I hear this feedback all the time. It's like, well, I don't want to blame my parents. I'm like, it's not about blaming in them. It's about understanding the origins of where this comes from, how it's affected you, so that you have the tools. It's almost like diagnosing an illness. Like, oh, once you diagnose the illness, you know what the problem is, and now you can find the things that will help you get well from that, whether it be natural healing, whether it be, whatever it is that you need to help you heal. You can find those different modalities. So, but at any rate, I was talking a little bit about generational healing and how important it is, and how going back and looking at the patterns that were handed down it's just so valuable. So valuable. And to be able to do that from a place that's more detached and not so swept up in the story. It's thinking of yourself as sitting on the bank of the river and watching the river go by versus being swept up in the river, and I know if you've been through abuse and illness and trauma and narcissistically abusive parents, you're going to feel like you're being swept up in a river, and just being carried through this current, but you can get out and you can learn to detach from it, and then learn. And this is all part of the release process, is that you become more and more detached, not numb, but, less and less like triggered by everything when you do this, the kind of work that I do and that I was trained to do, the emotional release, the energetic release, and then the core negative belief release processes.
Now, this came to mind because when I kind of realized that what situation I was in a relationship, I began to question, am I the narcissist too? And I think a lot of people can get wrapped up in that. So could you maybe give us shed some light on that topic of why we start to just question ourselves? Am I the bad person?
Yeah. Oh my goodness, that's such a great question. It's such an important one. My clients ask me that one all the time. They're like, am I a narcissist? Well, first of all, I'll say you're here and you're exploring, you're introspective, you're going inside, you're willing to do the work. You really, really want to change. That's not something that we see from narcissists. So that's a number one thing. If you're an empath and a sensitive, you have a more intense connection to feeling and to feeling things from other people. So I think the primary reason why we start to question, are we narcissistically abusive ourselves, is because we're made to feel like we're horrible people because that's been projected on us. We're carrying shame. We're like receptacles for shame, not just theirs, but our own. And so now we have this like double shame cup that's overflowing. And so that's one of the things that makes us question it. I think it's important. One thing I do think is really important for all of us as empaths and sensitives that are on the path, that are trying to heal, especially from narcissistic abuse, because, the psychological abuse really is energetic abuse, is that I think it's really important to ask yourself the questions: what are some ways that I might be using tactics that I learned from my narcissistic parent? What are some ways that I might be manipulating that I learned from them? What are, a lot of times they're critical and highly judgmental, right? All the time, especially the covert ones. And so, well, how am I being judgmental and critical? And so but the difference is you can look at that and go, oh, I'm doing this like they did, and I can change this. I can see how I'm repeating a pattern, repeating a behavior, but I no longer want to engage in that, and I can make a change for that. So I think that's an important thing for empaths and sensitives to question about themselves along the path. And then, I think we can't not question, like, am I a narcissist? Because they're constantly turning the tables on us and making us believe that we're wrong, bad, shameful, terrible people. So,
Yeah. Yeah, that's one of the first things I started realizing was like, wait, how does everything end up being my fault? How is it everything get turned on me? And, I got so confused. But then it was just, I was like, oh, okay, this is one of those telltale signs. And I was actually listening to a podcast at the time when I started kind of realizing these things, talking about narcissism. And it was the first time I'd ever heard about it. And my whole body had chills. I was on the treadmill at the gym and I remember going, oh, no, 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 no. Because I knew what my intuition was telling me, but I did not want to hear it. And I think so many of us, like I know we've talked about briefly, but the effect of narcissistic abuse kind of diminishes your own intuition and pushes it down.
yeah.
So how do you balance that, whether someone might be going through that relationship now or wanting to heal that parental part of them, the upbringing, like really honoring the intuition and bringing that back online.
Yes. Oh my gosh, it's such an important piece of this. And that's part of what I help people with is intuitive development. Because you become so confused about what voice is what inside of you. Because if you had a narcissistic parent, you're going to ruminate about most things. Is that person mad at me? Are they not talking to me? Are they, like you go through this chatter in your mind. I think in some ways the narcissistic abusive chatter is just worse than, the norm. And I know as women, a lot of us are really, really hard on ourselves, but it just gets amped up when you go through narcissistic abuse because you are shaming yourself, you're blaming yourself, you're guilting yourself, you're, so it's like double. So it's so hard to hear that inner voice. So developing your intuition is a very, very important part of this, learning to trust yourself. When you get into a narcissistically abusive relationship, you're just like, I don't think I ever want to trust again because I don't trust myself to pick somebody. I didn't see the red flags, or when I saw the red flags, I ignored them. Or, I just, where was my intuition? Of course, it's there all along. And sometimes I do think our intuition steers us into relationships that aren't going to be easy so we can heal. It's a part of how we're built. I think so many of us think intuition is supposed to just lead us down this happy path where everything's perfect all the time. And unfortunately, that's not what Earth Plane is all about. So it's a big part of it. And you can make your world into this really beautiful, wonderful place. I'm not saying that. But, it's a big piece is understanding that intuition has many different functions.
Yeah, and I'm laughing because I had that same thought in my own experience. Was like, wow, I really just that some part of me just really just looked the other way at the beginning of the relationship to have all these things come together, so I could be sucked in, if you will, to
Yeah.
this learning experience, and
Yeah. I love that you said
retrospective.
that.
Yeah, it's like it
Yeah.
was like, I mean, because like the energetics of it, that I really truly believe that I was drawn to that situation, to that person at that time because of
Yeah.
everything we're talking about, to really the wake up call that everything's happening for me, and thinking about what you were saying about healing generational wounds and patterns, of thinking about the generational empaths in your family too. That was kind of the start for me, being like, oh wow, like seeing grandmother, mother, all these beautiful people in my life that I'm like, now I get to stand in my power, fully embodied in who I am, to lead the way forward. Not only just heal from the narcissist, but like, this is what it means to be a powerful, empowered empath, like woman
Yeah.
in her power. And that's why I named the show Witchy Wellness, because a witch to me is somebody who's
Yes.
fully embodied in her own power.
Yes. For sure. I love the name of this. It's something that as little girls, my best friend and I played witches all the time. We had witch names, that like we were really into it. Good witches, of course. But I just find it, really amazing that as I went through my life and the healing the self, such a big part of that kind of thinking,
Yes.
So
Ugh,
the witch, the goddess, the healer, the crone, the mother, the maiden, the earth, Gaia, all of
yes.
those.
And we're all being called in our own way to heal those parts of ourselves. And Gaia is calling us forward right now too, with all the weather changes. Like, Earth is
Yeah.
its own entity, and she's raising her vibration, and she's releasing right now too, is my belief. And we
Yeah.
are just, it's kind of hard, I think, as an ego to think this. We're just these little microorganisms on this entity that is Earth. And
Yeah.
we get to do the inner work. As she raises her vibration, we are called to do the inner work and raise our vibrations as well.
Yeah. For sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, my last question before we start to close the
Mhm.
show down is we talked to you. I know you focus so much on helping women heal those kind of core wounds from childhood with the narcissistic abuse that stems from some parent, one of their parents. What are the 5 core wounds maybe people can start to look out for? Maybe they think, well, maybe this is something I need to do a little bit deeper work on. What are those 5 core wounds that you call, is it, you call them ACONs? Is that what you call them?
ACONs, Adult Children of
Yes.
Narcissists.
Yes.
And if you're an ACON, you have been conned. You know,
Yeah.
you've been conned by a parent who has made you
Yeah.
believe that you're not a good person, you're not lovable, and those are part of the woundings. Those are part of the beliefs that really just get instilled in our subconscious minds and thus our body, because I think those two things are one thing. So, but so some of the things that get really crushed in us is self-identity. And so that's who you think you are as a human, and a lot of times you become a people pleaser, you become, especially empaths and sensitives, the lost child in the family, the scapegoat tend to be in that category. And then so self-identity and who you think you are as a human, but there's also your self-esteem, self-worth. Your physical body, of course, gets affected, and that's something we've been talking about an awful lot in here. So those are, some of the major woundings that we go through. Our life purpose, that we get totally disconnected from who we really are, because we have to live our lives in service to the narcissist. If you have a narcissistic parent, it's all about them. So you have to focus on them all the time, because you're always trying to make sure they're happy, except that they're never happy. So you fall into this giant trap all the time of trying to make them happy. So you become a people pleaser. So, and perfectionism is another place where people really get hung up, and they get, that wound to self, where you feel like you can't be good enough ever. And so those are some of the major woundings that we go through. Yeah, it's an intense thing that we experience as ACONs. So, and I'm playing with, becoming an icon. I'm kind of moving into that, going from ACON to icon, like, like somebody who's really grounded, and the grounded empath who feels healed, who is just like, okay, well, this thing that's coming up right now is just something for me to work on. It's whether it be something physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, we look at the whole holistic package. So but yeah, so anyway, there's those wounds.
Yeah.
So
And
many wounds.
I'm just thinking, yep, check on my own journey. And so many people I know listening to this are going to be like, wow, okay, there's some stuff that I might need to dig into after listening to this episode. And I guess my last question is a follow-up. I lied. I thought I had one last one.
Okay.
In terms of parents, we talked about ACONs. What about, I guess, dealing if there's a pattern in your family, right? Is there a higher probability of siblings or other family members who are also going to mirror or become that narcissistic kind of type of energy in your life?
Absolutely. Yeah. I've worked with so many people who have narcissistic siblings.
Yeah.
To one degree or another, they say in psychology that narcissism lies on a continuum from goodness, like healthy self-love, all the way to the narcissistic personality disorder, where it's a complete cutoff from love, which is how I say it. I don't really hear a lot of theorists or practitioners talking about it that way, but yeah.
And I just want to throw that out there for people too, that you might be like, well, maybe not so much my parent, but somebody like a sibling, you might recognize these, because I think it's still just as important growing up in those first, 7 years of your life when you're learning all these subconscious programs too. You're like this sponge where these beliefs and these behaviors kind of can really stem from. But it doesn't matter any age,
Absolutely.
it's still going to affect you.
Yeah. Yeah. And it turns out that in the research that they find that it's usually the golden child who ends up also becoming narcissistic.
Mm,
And that is the one that, the parent focused on as being, you know, the one who produced in a way that made them look good. It wasn't like, oh, she or he did really great things in the world and I'm so proud of them. I'm so proud of them because it made me look good. They did this right and that right and this other thing. Oh, but they did that thing wrong, so they'll still get the shame, they'll still get the guilt, but the pressure on them is really different. And you tend to see, or I tend to see, that a lot of the golden children don't tend to go to therapy either. Or if they do, it's not as easy for them to be introspective as an empath who's just like, what, why, how do I make this better? How do I heal this? Help me,
yes, yes, I totally agree. And I think for me, it was my empath in me wanted me to be the golden child and that perfectionist too. So hearing you say that, it makes sense on that way, but also the wounding of the empath side of it is like, in order to be safe, that perfectionism can be born as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, well, we could just talk for hours and hours. We might need to do another
Okay.
episode here, Dr. Meg, but thank you so much for coming on and sharing your beautiful heart with us all. It was such an honor to speak with you today. And was there anything else on your mind that you wanted to kind of talk about before we start to close the show out?
Just semantic things, that I do have some free offerings for people. I have the 52 ways to tell if your parent is a narcissist on my website at meghaworth.com/narcissistic parents / which I guess, I'll give you the links to that. But it's a good way for people to start to understand, or continue to understand, because I think one of the things that we need is continued reinforcement, because the deprogramming process is a long-term process, where we see a video and we're like, yeah, that's right. Especially if you're still dealing with your narcissistic parent, you have to be reminded that this is what's happening, because the confusion and tactics and destabilization that goes on is just enormous. So that should be helpful for people. And then also I have some upcoming courses that I'm really excited to release. They're going to be affordable, smaller, bite-sized courses, because I find I've interviewed a lot of empaths and sensitives, and they will say, like, I get so overwhelmed with big programs. Can you just do like one on the inner child and one on intuitive development and one, and there's an overarching course too that really lets them know, like, these are the wounds. And then there's meditations in there, there's journal prompts, and then also processes that they can do to help them with the energy dynamic of releasing themselves from the abusive past that they've been through and how it's affecting their present lives. So
Beautiful.
yeah, so there's that stuff. But I also just want to say that if you've been through narcissistic abuse, it's going to be so important for you to do healing on yourself and to find somebody who has the to really be able to take you to the next level. Especially if you've done a lot of therapy on yourself already, you may want, you feel like you've hit a wall in that, and you're tired of spinning in the story and you want to go deeper into the subconscious mind to release. Look for somatic psychotherapists or somatic therapists that can really help you. And I work with people worldwide. So there.
Yeah. Well, everything will be in the show notes for everybody to click and find out more. And if you guys are really feeling called or maybe triggered by this episode, your intuition's getting a little ding, follow up. Even if it's getting the free 52 ways to see if you're a child or you're an ACON, or Whatever it is, follow up and continually taking the next step and the next step, because you didn't get here overnight. You're not going to heal it overnight, but it's just so important to keep slowly taking those steps forward, listening to your intuition and taking the aligned action. Thank you, Dr. Meg, so much again for coming on the show. And lastly, how may we, as the listeners, as a huge act of gratitude, be of service for you in return today?
Goodness. I guess I don't know. I guess spread the word. I think the message ultimately is the most important thing, and getting the message out to people who really need the kind of help that people like me provide. And, because I know there's people searching, there's people praying, there's people who just like don't know. Like, I want something, but I don't know what it is. What is the thing? And to follow that intuitive voice, like you just said, that leaning into this feels so right, and not allowing all the things that stop us from going forward, the fear of, oh my gosh, this could be so hard. And yeah, it can be hard, it can be scary, but it's so much better than living in sickness and living in, like, I know so many empaths that are stuck in bed, like they get to that point. And if that's you and you don't know your path and purpose and self-identity and self-worth, and you don't know who you really are, then you find that out, become that.
Yes, it's happening for you. Like we said, this is your opportunity. Well, thank you so much. It was such a pleasure talking with you today.